Okay, this is going to sound very crazy, but do not lift with your legs. Never lift with your legs. If you know somebody and they're going to be lifting something, the last thing you should tell them to do is to bend their knees and lift with their legs. We need to stop that. If you have friends that are runners, or if you're a runner yourself, stop thinking about your knees and your legs. Stop pumping your legs to go faster. It's not useful. I know that sounds crazy. Now, my name is Dr. Strickland. I have been a practicing physical therapist for 12 years, and I've written a book with all of this information in it, and you can find that down in the description below, just like I've said before, and I highly recommend getting it. If you have Amazon Kindle Unlimited, you can actually read it for free. You don't even need to buy it. So please get that information and read that as we're going through with these videos, because I'm going to basically be making videos on most of the main concepts from that book. Now, up to this point, and it's very imperative to understand, we have talked about a few other things already. We've talked about posture, we've talked about biomechanics, we've talked about how the muscles operate at a very low level, and then how misusing those muscles actually leads to knots and adhesions, basically overstress injuries, and then how those overstress injuries impact our body, impact our ability to function, and especially over the course of time. These types of injuries are not things that are like falling down and breaking your leg. They don't just happen. Any injury you have where you're like, I don't know how this actually came to be, it's probably because of misusing muscles, and it's that overstrain injury a little bit at a time every single day that's led you to where you are. And a big one is lifting with the legs, running through the legs, pumping the legs when you're working out, thinking about the legs. Now, there are many things that I want you to learn from this, of course. But if one of the few things that you take away from this video is what the quadriceps actually do, I'm going to be very happy. Okay? Because the quadriceps, just like every other muscle in your body, has one job to do, and it's really good at doing one single thing. With the quadriceps, you could go on Google and you could look up their job, and you're probably going to see, just like I've seen because I've done it before, 5 or 6 different things that they're good at. And while that is technically true, the way the quadriceps are built, they are good at many things. But all of those things are necessary for it to do its one job very, very well. And that one job, that one thing, is don't fall down. That's it. That is all the quadriceps are for. But how can we tell? Because that's going to be important. Well, let's look at them. Basically, if you look at a muscle in the body and you just position it in your brain so that you can see it, and then you just kind of watch it as you're moving and what is it doing while you go, you can usually pick up on the function of that muscle. And the reason I say do not lift with your legs is because most people, and I know this from experience, when you tell them to use their legs, they think about the quadriceps. They think about their thighs. And I can't even tell you how many people have come in and they are having a hard time getting out of a chair. And their doctor is telling them, well, you need to make those stronger. And they're pointing to their thighs. And then the patient comes in saying, I need to make these stronger. And they're looking at their thighs. It's wrong. Do not do that. So let's take a look at them, and then we'll go through and we'll prove why the legs do not lift you. They do not walk you. They do not perform movement. That is not their job. So there's 2 pictures on the screen right now. And the first one I want you to look at is the one that has the red on it. And you can see there I've very poorly drawn in where the quadriceps would be. And I want you to notice how they are below the pelvis. They actually attach up onto the pelvis in part, but they are, for the most part, in that upper leg bone on the femur. They then cross the knee joint and they actually attach to the lower leg bone. So you have four big, huge muscles, and I'm not going to get into the specifics there, and I'm not going to get into the argument about how many muscles the quadriceps actually are, because they're talking about all this crazy stuff now. I've been doing research on this for a very long time, so I've seen how things have kind of progressed as we've gone along. But you have this big, huge fat muscle group in your upper thigh that then comes down. Well, I guess it should come down, right? And it attaches to your patella, all of them on this. And then there's a little strip down below that that attaches it to the lower leg. It's just crazy. All of that power in such. It reminds me of the genie from Aladdin. I'm probably going to get sued by Disney for making that reference. Anyway, that's what the quadriceps look like. That's where they are. So we're going to be watching them here in a moment. But what I want you to also keep in mind as we're doing this is when it comes to movement, the thing that we want to move is actually our center of mass. Now, the other picture on the screen has a little blue dot, and you can see that it's basically inside of the pelvis there. That is essentially where that center of mass is. And that's a very important part of our body, especially when it comes to balance, because wherever that center of mass goes, we have to go because it's our center of mass. It's the majority of our weight. It's where we're kind of like centered, located, whatever you want to call it. But that pelvic area, if you control that, you can control another person. That's a lot of, wrestling and hand-to-hand combat techniques are designed based on that concept. So keep that in mind as we're looking at all of these muscles and more pictures, because that pelvic area, when we're talking about needing to move our body, that's where we want to move from. So you can already see the quadriceps are below it, not in line with it, not above it, not with it, below it. Okay? So we're going to watch it now in motion. So I'm going to start the video now. So if you're not watching yet, please go ahead and do so. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is I'm going to point down my legs. So I'm going to point where most people are going to follow their quads. And as I go down, I want you to see how my hands are changing. They're, when I'm standing, pointed down at the ground. And then as I go to squat, they're going to point forward. And they're going to be in this constant motion no matter where I go. Now, when we're looking at efficiency and accuracy, we want something that is kind of always pointed in one direction to move us in that direction. I think that pretty much makes sense. You don't want to be turning around in a circle because that's not going to be nearly as accurate for the most part. It's arguable, I get it. But for the most part, if you're trying to do something in a circle, in a rotation, it's not going to be as accurate as something that is pointed in a straight line and has all of its force going in that one direction. Okay? And that's why guns are so useful. That's why they've superseded just about any other weapon we've ever had. It's because it explodes and everything goes in that one direction. But what I find even more interesting about this is right now, it's the end of the video, I'm standing. If you were to look down at those quadriceps again, remember I was saying they're pointed down at the ground. Now, why on God's green earth would we ask a muscle that is pointed down at the ground to move us forward? I mean, just ask yourself that question. Think of any activity where you're going to be in motion on your feet. You're not moving towards the ground. Actually, we're trying to avoid that if at all possible, right? Why are those muscles then considered movement? Why are we telling people to pump their legs when they run? Which means that they then think that they need to use their legs when they're walking. It is pointed at the ground. It is not pointed where we're going. It doesn't make any sense. Not only that, but like I just showed, as we're going up and down, it's pointed all over the place. It's not pointed in one direction. It changes with us. And that's what we're going to look at next, because we want to find that consistency. We want to find what point is it directed at no matter where I go, because that's going to tell me what it does. When we were looking at it down towards the ground, down towards our knee, it was moving around too much. So we're going to look at it in the other direction and see if we can't find a consistent point that it's directed towards. Now, as you see in the video, I'm pointing up, and you can see now that they're pointed up at the pelvis. And if you can imagine it in your head if you're not watching the video. Think about any position that you're going to put yourself in. If you're going to stretch out, you're going to pull back, you're going to squat down, you're going to stand up. Those muscles are always going to be pointed up at your pelvis, no matter what. And that's insanely important because remember, the pelvis is the center of mass. Wherever that is, we are. If we have this big, powerful muscle that is always pointed up at our center of mass, that tells me that that muscle's job is to make sure that that center of mass stays where I want it to be. And if you think about it even further, if you go out walking and you stumble a little bit, what happens? Your leg shoots out. Your leg shoots out to catch you because that's its job. Your legs are for stability. They are for remaining upright and nothing else. That is their entire reason for being. Do not fall down, in so many words. So that's all great. But then what moves us? Well, what moves us is the glutes. I remember when I was thinking about this, I actually came up with the decision to say, well, if the legs aren't what's going to make me go forward because they're pointing down at the ground, let's go to the biggest muscle in the body and see if maybe that is what moves us. And luckily, the biggest muscle in our body, which is the glutes, are in the same area. So in the picture here, you can actually see exactly, relatively exactly, I guess, where they are. Now, in the picture that's furthest over here, sorry, you can see that I've drawn the line of the direction that they're in, but that blue circle, it's right around the greater trochanter. Now that's essentially where this muscle is going to insert on the leg. It's going to be right on that greater trochanter, essentially right where it's turning around in the socket. Okay, that's not exactly precise. I get it. It doesn't matter. That's essentially where it's going to be, which means I know that that's one point that it is going to be at, so that when we go to look at it in motion, I'll know where to put myself so that I can see it and follow it as I move. So it sits on the greater trochanter, essentially, okay? And then it also attaches back on the sacrum. So the other picture there, the one from behind the skeleton, you can see that a little bit more clearly. But I want you to notice how that muscle, even when we're just standing there, it is pretty much pointed out in front of us. And if you were to really look at it, instead of from directly the back, if you were to take it and look at it down, like from like at the head, you would see that it's actually kind of in a V shape. Okay, and that's important to understand here. But let's look at the video and watch it as we move. Okay, so right at the greater trochanter, I know that that's where it's going to be. So no matter where I put my leg, that's the insertion point for that muscle. It's not going to move from right there. So I'm going to place one finger on that, the other one back on the sacrum where it's attached to posteriorly, and now I'm going to move. And watch how it doesn't deviate. It is always essentially pointed out in front of my body, no matter what. And think about this. Remember, the pelvis, that's my center of mass. If I want to move, that's what I want to move. That muscle is directly behind it, and it's basically pointed right through the middle. What that tells me then is that that's the muscle that moves us forward. It is pointed forward. It's pointed where I want to go. If I get out of a chair, I want to move with that one because it's the one that is consistently pointed in the same direction no matter where I am or how I change heights. It is always pointed out in front of my pelvis. It is always right behind that center of mass and giving it that forward thrust. The glutes are movement. The legs are do not fall down. And I don't see how that's even arguable at this point. I think that's just how it is. Okay? So, essentially, the way that it manages this is how it manipulates the leg bone. Okay? So here you can see I've put the skeleton, I've taken the leg bone and put it straight out and then swept it back like in a walking motion. And as you can see here, again, that muscle, as it gets shorter, it's pulling that leg back behind us. That's what's going to give us that forward thrust. And based on where it's at, you can see in that far right picture how it's directly behind the center of mass in the pelvis. So, what does this mean? Primarily, we've moved wrong our whole life. We have not been moving right at any point in our entire history, essentially, at least not on purpose, as far as I know, because I've never heard anybody say that lifting with the legs is wrong. If anything, even I, as a physical therapist in a doctoral program, was taught to lift with my legs. I was taught to teach people how to lift with their legs. We're always taught to lift with our legs. So we're not doing it correctly. Now, it's not anybody's fault. That's what everybody's been told. And we just assumed that that was true. And we just perpetuated that through generations. But what that means is we need to rethink everything. We need to rethink medicine, fitness, wellness, sports, therapy, ergonomics, pretty much anything that has to do with movement. We need to change the message, and we need to change it with the youngest generation pretty much immediately, right? Because we want them to grow up moving in the right way. It's crazy. Now, more than that, because there are people out there who understand that the glutes are important, but they will do their squats and they'll do their deadlifts and they'll do their hip thrust exercises to make the glutes bigger. That's not enough. We have to understand that when we are on our feet, our glutes need to be on. And anytime we move while on our feet, it had better come from the glutes, not from the legs, but from the glutes. So stop telling people to lift with their legs, to pump their legs. And yes, there are people out there who already understand this concept to some extent, and that's great. But we need to understand that as an entire society, as an entire race of being human beings. We need to fundamentally change our outlook on what movement actually is and what it actually means. So there's more we could go over. I think I've beaten this horse long enough, but eventually we'll probably dive into more of the biomechanics to prove this even more. And we can dive more into the anatomy, into energy conservation, survival mechanisms, and all that kind of stuff. But I think that's for another video. So let's get into an activity. I want you to start to learn how to use your glutes. And if this is new information, which 12 years of physical therapy tells me it most likely is, we need to start by just becoming aware that that muscle's there and that we can turn it on, and we need to start playing with it to understand how it does incorporate into everything that we do. So the first thing I want you to do is just try to squeeze the glutes, okay? Not a Kegel. Don't go into your pelvis. Don't push your legs back in the chair to try and get the glutes to go. Just squeeze the glutes. And if you're having a hard time with that, what I recommend is taking your hand in this part right here and shoving it right along your crack and then trying to fill that palm up with that muscle. Now, even if you only use one hand, that's fine. Squeeze both sides, but you can always use both hands if you really like yourself that much. That's fine too. It doesn't really matter. But I want you to do that every 2 hours. Just squeeze it 10 times. Try to close your eyes if you need to. Try to visualize that muscle as well as feel it to really begin to understand where it is and how it feels. To be on and to be off. Try to feel it all the way up and all the way down. Try to get an idea for where that muscle is. Then, once you have that, we will definitely be going over a way to learn how to control them, how to get better with them, shifting gears, isolation even more, how to use them to turn your body. There's a lot of other stuff that we want to go through, but the very first thing you need to do is just figure out where they are and then just start trying to use them. You know, when you're going to go out and walk, just that much, just turn them on that little bit and feel the difference. That's more than enough for right now, because most people, that is hard enough as a starting point. So, where do we go next then? Well, we could go into that control mechanism with the glutes, but I think that's for the future. You know, I want to get to all three of the major muscles that we're screwing up, why that matters, and try to start making these changes for you as soon as possible. So, we're actually going to go up to the gut for the next video. I appreciate you getting this far. Again, I've been Dr. Strickland. I appreciate you. Like, comment, subscribe, share this video with somebody if they're having knee pain, back pain, anything like that. And I will speak with you again very soon.